Conclusion, cliffhanger, approximately 500 words. The days after Daniel left felt unreal. The house, once a sanctuary of familiar routine, became a cage echoing with his absence. Every corner seemed to remember him, the faint scent of his cologne lingering on the chair where he draped his jacket, the slight indentation on the couch where he had sat. I avoided those places, pretending nothing had changed, but even the air seemed charged with unspoken tension. Messages from him came sporadically, each one loaded with the weight of everything we hadn't said. A simple "Are you okay?" could unravel me for hours. A photo of the street outside my window sent a jolt straight to my chest, reminding me how close he had been, how close he still could be. And every time my phone buzzed, my pulse spiked, not entirely from anticipation, but from fear of what those words might reveal about him, about us. I tried to occupy myself. Work became a refuge I couldn't fully immerse in. Friends noticed my distraction, my quiet, and my forced smiles. My sister asked if I wanted to talk, but I didn't. How could I explain the collision of desire, guilt, and fear that had overtaken my life in less than 24 hours? How could I tell her that the person I'd spent years denying might still hold the key to something I was terrified to claim? Then came the first encounter after that night. Daniel showed up at my doorstep unexpectedly, as if no time had passed, as if we could just slip back into what we'd almost touched. But the look in his eyes was different, guarded, intense, full of things he couldn't say aloud. He stepped inside, the faint scent of rain clinging to him, and I realized the moment we had shared wasn't just between us anymore, it had changed the air around us, altered the boundaries we had taken for granted. "Hi," he said softly, not with warmth, but with caution. "Hi," I replied, voice tight. We stood in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that screams louder than words. Every glance, every movement was loaded. When he finally spoke, it was measured. "We need to be careful." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Careful? After everything? Careful how? I asked, though my heart thumped with a dangerous anticipation. "Careful with each other," he said, eyes flicking to mine like he feared my reaction. "Because once this starts, we can't stop it without breaking everything else." I swallowed hard. That was the truth neither of us wanted to face. The magnetic pull between us, irresistible and taboo, now loomed over every choice. We had crossed a line, even if it had only been in thought, in fleeting touches, in what we hadn't yet allowed ourselves to act on. Daniel stepped closer, hesitated, then turned his gaze away. I realized then that the danger wasn't just external. The real risk was the storm inside both of us, emotions too volatile to navigate without shattering something sacred. "I should go," he said finally, voice low, almost pleading. I nodded, though part of me ached to stop him. "Yeah," I whispered. He lingered for a moment, a pause that stretched like eternity. Then, without another word, he left. The door clicked softly behind him, leaving me alone again, but the house didn't feel empty. The tension he left behind vibrated in the walls, in my chest, in every memory of that night. I sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, staring at the messages we hadn't sent yet, the conversations we couldn't have yet. One thought kept replaying in my mind, haunting and undeniable: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And deep down, I knew the next time we met, the line between restraint and surrender would blur, and neither of us would be ready for what might happen. Introduction, approximately 500 words. The rain had been falling all afternoon, relentless and gray, leaving the streets slick and glimmering under the weak city lights. I sat by the window, mug in hand, watching droplets race each other down the glass. Each streak seemed to echo the rhythm of my restless thoughts, uneven, unpredictable, and impossible to catch. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of your own heartbeat. I had returned to this city only a week ago, drawn by a mixture of nostalgia and a desire to escape the life I had been living. Somewhere between the safe routines of work and the hollow evenings spent alone, I realized I had been running, not from anyone, exactly, but from the truth of who I was. It had taken me years to convince myself that solitude was easier than risk, that walls were safer than letting anyone in. And yet, tonight, that illusion felt fragile. The street outside flickered under the dim glow of the street lamp, shadows shifting with the passing cars. I hugged my knees to my chest, a restless shiver crawling down my spine. It wasn't just the weather. Something felt off, a sensation I couldn't name, like the house was holding its breath, waiting. I hadn't expected anyone, not tonight, and yet, as I reached for my phone, a faint creak echoed from the hallway. I froze. Old house, I reminded myself. Floors settle, pipes groan, but the sound had been deliberate, or so it seemed. Slow, cautious, deliberate. My pulse picked up. The rational part of my mind told me it was nothing. A neighbor, an animal, my imagination. I swallowed, trying to calm the flutter in my chest. And then I noticed something I hadn't expected, a pair of shoes by the door. Not mine, dark leather, worn at the edges, neatly placed as if waiting for someone. The rational explanations faltered. My mind raced. Who could it be? I hadn't told anyone I was back. The silence of the house pressed in, making the shadows deeper, the air heavier. I sank onto the couch, gripping my mug so tightly my knuckles whitened. Thoughts I had buried long ago began to surface, memories of him. Daniel. The name echoed in my mind, unbidden, like a ghost returning to a place it had once haunted. Older now, more distant, yet somehow still impossibly present. My fingers hovered over the phone, hesitant. Should I text? Should I ignore it? The air seemed to thrum with anticipation, as if the walls themselves were waiting for me to make a choice. And then, without warning, a knock at the door shattered the stillness. Not loud, but insistent. A rhythm that made my chest tighten, my stomach twist. I froze, my breath caught halfway, staring at the door. Part of me wanted to run, to hide, to pretend the knock didn't exist. Another part, an older, more reckless part, wanted to open it. To see, to confront the past that had followed me all these years. I placed my hand on the doorknob, feeling the cold metal through my palm. My mind raced. Is it him? Is it just someone else? Am I ready to face what I've been running from? The storm outside had quieted, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the windows. But inside, my heart thundered. The moment hung suspended, fragile and taut, like the edge of a blade. And then I turned the knob. Climactic moment, approximately 901,100 words. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in my old bedroom staring at the ceiling fan as it turned lazily above me, each rotation counting down to something I couldn't name. Daniel's presence lingered in the house like a second heartbeat, imaginary, maybe, but impossible to ignore. Every sound made me tense. Every shadow felt heavier. Be careful with me, his words replayed over and over. Just before dawn, a sound pulled me from that restless half-sleep. Not the house settling, not the rain, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving down the hallway. My breath caught. I sat up, heart hammering, ears straining. The footsteps stopped outside my door. For a long moment, nothing happened. I considered calling out, saying his name, asking what he was doing here, demanding answers. Instead, I stayed silent. The door creaked open. Daniel stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim hall light. His hair was messy, his expression unreadable. He looked like someone who hadn't slept either. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't be here." Yet he hadn't left. I swung my legs off the bed, the cold floor grounding me. "Then why are you?" His jaw tightened. He closed the door behind him, softly, as if afraid the house itself might overhear. "Because I tried to walk away. I drove around for an hour. And every road brought me back here." The words landed heavy between us. "You can't just." I stopped, searching for the right language. "You can't come back into my life like this." "I know," he said. "That's the problem." The space between us felt charged, dangerous. I could see every detail now, the faint scar near his eyebrow, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched like he was holding himself back. "I spent years pretending I didn't think about you," he continued, voice low. "Years telling myself whatever I felt back then was just confusion." My chest tightened painfully. And now I walk into this house and it all comes back," he said. Stronger, louder. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. "You're not the only one," I admitted, the confession tearing itself free before I could stop it. I stayed away because it was easier than facing what it meant. What did it mean to you? He asked. I laughed softly, bitter. Everything I wasn't allowed to be. He stepped closer, cautiously, as if approaching something fragile. I was terrified, he said. Of what people would say. Of what it would cost me. Of what it would cost us, I corrected. His eyes met mine, dark and conflicted. Yes. The air between us felt too thin. Too alive. I was painfully aware of how close he was, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough that stepping back felt impossible. This is a mistake, I said, though my body didn't move. He nodded. Probably. Neither of us listened to our better judgment. His hand lifted, hesitating inches from my arm. Tell me to leave, he said quietly. And I will. I should have said it. I didn't. Instead, I whispered, I don't know how. That was all it took. He closed the distance, not rushing, not touching at first, just standing so close that our breaths mingled. The tension was unbearable, every nerve ending screaming awareness. When his fingers finally brushed my arm, it felt like an electric shock. I inhaled sharply. Daniel. I know, he murmured. I know. Quote. He pulled back just enough to look at me, really look at me, like he was memorizing my face. This doesn't erase everything, he said. It doesn't fix the past. I'm not asking it to, I replied. For a moment, time seemed to fracture. The house creaked around us, the storm outside returning in a low rumble. It felt like the world narrowing down to this single, impossible point. Then his forehead rested gently against mine. The intimacy of it, soft, restrained, almost reverent, was overwhelming. My eyes closed on instinct. I felt his breath hitch, the slightest tremor betraying how hard this was for him too. We can't stay here, he whispered. I know, but I don't want to go. The confession shattered something fragile inside me. A sudden knock thundered through the house. We jumped apart like we'd been burned. What the hell? I started, heart racing. The knock came again, louder, urgent. My phone buzzed on the nightstand at the same time. I glanced down, dread pooling in my stomach. A message from my sister. Why is Daniel's car outside your house? My blood ran cold. He saw my expression and immediately understood. Someone knows, he said. Someone's here, I whispered. The knock turned into pounding. Open the door. A voice called from downstairs. Familiar. Angry. My father's friend. Daniel's father. The weight of the moment crashed down on us. Years of secrecy, fear, and unfinished truth colliding all at once. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, panic flickering across his face. I can explain, he said, though it sounded more like he was trying to convince himself. Can you? I asked softly. Another pound on the door rattled the frame. Daniel looked at me then, really looked at me, his eyes full of apology and something dangerously close to hope. No matter what happens next, he said, you should know this wasn't a lie. Not for me. My heart ached. I believe you. The pounding downstairs grew louder, more insistent. We stood there, caught between past and present, desire and consequence, knowing that once that door opened, nothing would be the same. I took a breath, steeling myself, and started down the stairs, falling action, approximately 650 to 750 words. The door downstairs never opened. That was the first strange thing. The pounding stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving behind a silence so complete it rang in my ears. I stood frozen on the third step, my hand gripping the banister, every muscle locked in place. Daniel was behind me, close enough that I could feel the tension radiating off him. Seconds passed, then minutes. Nothing. Did he leave? I whispered. Daniel didn't answer right away. He leaned past me, peering through the narrow gap between the stairs and the wall, as if he expected someone to suddenly reappear. He wouldn't just walk away, he said finally, doubt heavy in his voice. My phone buzzed again. One message, then another. He's gone. I don't know what he thinks he saw. My sister. Relief and dread tangled together in my chest. He left, I said quietly. Daniel exhaled, long and shaky, then sank down onto the step behind me. He ran his hands over his face like he was trying to erase the last hour. I watched him from above, noticing details I hadn't before, the faint tremor in his fingers, the way his shoulders slumped now that the immediate danger had passed. You should go, I said, though the words felt wrong the moment they left my mouth. He looked up at me, eyes dark and conflicted. Do you want me to? The question hung there, heavy with everything we hadn't said. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. My heart was still racing, my thoughts scattered. I don't know what I want anymore. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than I'd managed to articulate. That's fair. We moved back upstairs without another word, the house suddenly feeling too exposed, too full of witnesses, old memories pressed into the walls, expectations that didn't belong to us. In my bedroom, Daniel stood near the door, not crossing the threshold this time. That distance felt deliberate. I never meant for you to get caught in this, he said softly. My family, their assumptions. I've been caught my whole life, I replied. Just not like this. Our eyes met, and something shifted, not desire this time, but understanding edged with regret. The taboo wasn't just what almost happened between us. It was the truth hovering beneath the surface, threatening to surface no matter how hard we tried to bury it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, staring at the screen like it might explode. He's going to ask questions, he said. Maybe not tonight, but soon. I know. And when he does, Daniel hesitated. I don't know what I'll say. That admission hurt more than I expected. Not because I blamed him, but because I recognized myself in it. Years of silence don't dissolve in a single night. I'm not asking you to choose, I said quietly. He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if weighing every word I'd ever spoken to him. That's worse, he said. Because I want to. The honesty of it stole my breath. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The quiet felt unnatural, like the pause before something breaks. Daniel stepped closer, then stopped himself, hands curling into fists at his sides. If I stay, he said, this becomes real. Messy. Impossible to ignore. And if you leave? I asked. His voice dropped to a whisper. It haunts us both. We stood there, suspended between two futures neither of us was ready to face. I noticed how the light from the hallway cut across his face, half shadowed, half clear. It felt symbolic in a way that made my chest ache. Finally, he reached for the doorknob. I need time, he said, to figure out who I am when I'm not running. I nodded, though every instinct in me wanted to pull him back. Just don't disappear. He paused, hands still on the knob. I already tried that, he said. It didn't work. The door opened, then closed softly behind him. I sat on the edge of the bed long after his footsteps faded, listening to the house settle around me. Everything looked the same walls, the same furniture, but it felt irrevocably altered, like a fault line had cracked open beneath my feet. My phone buzzed one last time. We need to talk. Soon. I stared at the message, my reflection staring back at me in the darkened screen. The question wasn't whether this was over. It was whether either of us was brave enough to see it through. Title: An Unexpected Encounter That Changed Everything, True Gay Story, LGBTQ. The evening I remember most didn't begin with anything extraordinary. It was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you notice your own breathing. Rain tapped softly against the windows of my childhood home, the same place I'd returned to after years of convincing myself I'd outgrown it. The house smelled of old wood and detergent, familiar and suffocating at the same time. I was alone, or at least, I thought I was. I stood near the kitchen window, watching the streetlight flicker as the rain blurred its glow. My life had settled into a routine that felt safe on the surface: work during the day, long evenings alone, unanswered messages from people I wasn't brave enough to let in. Safe, but empty. I told myself that was enough. It wasn't. That night, I kept thinking about him. Daniel had always existed on the edges of my life. My father's friend's son. Older. Confident. The kind of man who filled a room without trying. Growing up, I learned early what I was allowed to feel, and what I wasn't. So whatever fluttered in my chest whenever Daniel laughed or looked my way, I buried it deep, labeling it something harmless. Admiration, curiosity, anything but the truth. I hadn't seen him in years. Not until that week. His name echoed in my thoughts as I rinsed a mug in the sink, my reflection staring back at me in the dark glass. I looked older, tired, someone who had spent too long pretending. I shook my head, annoyed at myself. This was supposed to be a quiet night. Just me and the sound of rain. Then I heard it. A noise. Not loud, just the faint creak of wood from somewhere down the hall. I froze, my heartbeat suddenly louder than the storm outside. This house always made sounds, I reminded myself. Pipes. Floors settling. Memories. Still. Unease curled in my stomach. I turned off the kitchen light, the darkness swallowing the room. The hallway stretched before me, dim and familiar, yet strangely altered. One door stood open. It hadn't been before. I was sure of it. My thoughts spiraled, unwanted and intrusive. Why now? Why tonight? As I stepped closer, a wave of memories rushed in. Daniel standing in this very hallway years ago, smiling like he owned the world. The way my chest had tightened back then. The way I'd looked away, afraid someone might see too much in my eyes. I told myself to stop. To breathe. Another sound came from the room. Softer this time. Almost like someone shifting their weight. My pulse raced. Was I imagining things, or had something, or someone, returned to this house along with me? And if it was him, what did that mean for everything I'd spent my life trying to deny? I stood there, hand hovering inches from the doorframe, knowing that whatever waited on the other side might change everything. Or destroy it. Did I really want to find out? Rising action, approximately 1,400 words. The door didn't creak when I pushed it open. That unsettled me more than if it had. This house had always announced itself, every hinge, every floorboard eager to remind you that it was old and watching. Silence meant intention. The room was empty. At least, that's what it looked like at first glance. A faint light from the street slipped through the curtains, painting the bed in pale stripes. The air felt disturbed, like someone had been there moments ago. My chest tightened. I scanned the corners, the closet door, the window. Nothing. No one. You're tired, I told myself. Grief does strange things. Memory does worse. I stepped back into the hallway, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle even to me. The rain outside had softened into a steady whisper, the kind that lulls you into forgetting time exists. I locked the door, twice, then returned to the living room, where my jacket lay folded over the back of the chair. That's when I noticed it. A pair of shoes. They were by the door, neatly placed as if they belonged there. Dark leather, worn at the edges. Not mine. I stared at them longer than necessary, my mind racing through impossible explanations. Burglar. No. Nothing was disturbed. A neighbor. The door hadn't opened. I would have heard it, unless I hadn't. My phone buzzed in my hand, nearly making me jump out of my skin. A message. Unknown number. Did you always keep the porch light off? My breath caught. I typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on something neutral. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. You haven't changed. That voice, unspoken but unmistakable, echoed in my head. My stomach dropped. Daniel. I typed, my fingers trembling. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. Remember him, as if there had ever been a time when I'd been able to forget. I sank onto the couch, the leather cold against my palms. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it, wherever he was. You're here, I wrote. It wasn't a question. Down the street, he replied. I saw your light on. 1,000 questions pressed against my lips, but none of them felt safe enough to ask. Why now? Why here? Why after all these years? I didn't know you were back, I finally sent. I wasn't planning to be, he said. Life has a way of detouring. The room felt smaller, the walls inching closer as memories crept in uninvited. Daniel teaching me how to drive. Daniel laughing with my father. Daniel standing too close once, his arm brushing mine, my body reacting before my mind could stop it. I swallowed hard. Do you want to come in? The invitation hung there, heavy with implications I pretended not to notice. Are you sure? He asked. No, but I typed yes anyway. Minutes passed like hours. Every sound, the clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, felt amplified. I paced, straightened cushions that didn't need straightening, checked my reflection in the dark window. When the knock finally came, it was softer than I expected. I opened the door. Daniel stood there, rain-speckled hair darker than I remembered, shoulders broader, eyes sharper. Time had been kind to him in ways it hadn't been to me. Or maybe I'd just been harder on myself. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," I echoed. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us buzzed with something unspoken, electric and dangerous. He smelled like rain and cologne, familiar enough to make my chest ache. "You look," he stopped himself, then smiled faintly. "The same." I snorted. "You're lying." "Maybe a little," he admitted, stepping inside. His gaze flicked around the room, lingering on the family photos I hadn't taken down yet. "This place hasn't changed. That makes one of us." The door clicked shut behind him, final and decisive. I felt it in my bones. We stood there awkwardly, two men circling a past neither of us knew how to approach. He took off his jacket, draping it over the chair, the same chair my jacket had been on. A small, territorial act that didn't go unnoticed. "I heard about your dad," he said gently. My throat tightened. "Yeah, it's been an adjustment. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. You didn't owe me anything." The lie tasted bitter. He nodded, accepting it for what it was. Silence stretched again, thicker this time. His eyes met mine, searching. "For what?" I wasn't sure. "You still drink that awful instant coffee?" he asked, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Only when I hate myself," I said. "So, yes." That made him laugh, a real laugh, warm and unguarded. The sound hit me square in the chest. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it. We sat across from each other, cups between us, steam curling into the dim light. Conversation flowed more easily than I expected, safe topics at first. Work, travel, the weird comfort of returning to a place you once tried to escape. But beneath it all, something pulsed. Every glance lingered a second too long. Every accidental brush of fingers sent sparks up my arm. "You ever feel like you left something unfinished here?" he asked suddenly. My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" he shrugged, staring into his cup. "Just ghosts, I guess." I thought of the hallway, the open door, the shoes. "Yeah," I said softly. "I do." His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. "I should probably go," he said, though he didn't move. "Do you want to?" I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes snapped back to mine. The room seemed to hold its breath. "No," he said honestly. "But I don't know if staying is a good idea." The admission sent a thrill of fear and excitement through me. "Why not?" He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "Because some things are easier to leave buried." I thought of all the years I'd done exactly that. Buried, hidden, denied, or, I counted, my voice barely above a whisper, maybe some things come back because they need to be faced. Our gazes locked, the air between us taut as a wire. For a split second, I thought he might lean in, might close the distance. Instead, he stood abruptly. "I should get going," he repeated, firmer this time. Disappointment flared, sharp and unwelcome. I walked him to the door, every step heavy. He paused with his hand on the knob, turning back to me. "I'm glad you let me in," he said quietly. "Tonight, so am I." He hesitated, then leaned in, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I felt his warmth. "Be careful," he murmured. "With me." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. I stood there long after, staring at the empty space he'd left behind. My phone buzzed again. "This isn't over," his message read. I looked down the hallway, at the door that had been open earlier, my pulse quickening. I wasn't sure whether to be relieved or terrified. But one thing was clear, whatever had started tonight wasn't going to let either of us go easily.